The room was filled with voices. Loud voices. Voices of soldiers, drunk with victory. They laughed, shouted, and slammed their metal cups on the tables. Smoke from burning torches mixed with the smell of sweat and blood. Outside, the banners of war still waved in the night wind. The humans had won another battle. And as always, they wanted a prize. At the center of the room, chained by the wrist, stood a girl. She was not called a girl, not even a woman. The soldiers called her an animal. Their pleasure animal. To them, she was not human. She was not a person. She was a thing. A reward. Her skin was pale under the torchlight. Her eyes were dark and empty, trained to never meet the gaze of men. She kept her head bowed because that was what they taught her to do. If she looked up, punishment would come. If she spoke without being asked, punishment would come. She was alive, but she was not allowed to live. The general of the army raised his voice. Tonight, as a mark of victory, we give this reward to one of our finest. He pointed to a man standing silently among the crowd. The room went quiet. The chosen man was a captain. A tall figure in black uniform, his face hidden by the shadows of the fire. The others clapped and cheered, but he did not move. He simply watched the girl with steady eyes. The general laughed. "Captain, you have served with honor. Take your prize." The soldiers dragged the girl forward and pushed her to the ground before him. She fell on her knees, her chains clinking against the stone floor. Everyone expected him to smile, to shout in triumph, to show pride. That was what every man did when given a prize. But the captain did not smile. He did not shout. He did not even touch her. Instead, he bent down slowly and looked at her face. His voice was calm, too calm for such a noisy place. And then he asked something no one had ever asked before. "What is your name?" The girl froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She had no answer, because no one had ever asked. No one had ever cared. To the soldiers, she was not a person who needed a name. The hall went silent. Laughter stopped. The fire cracked in the corner, but no one moved. The soldiers stared at the captain as if he had spoken madness. "What?" one of them said with a laugh. "She has no name. She is just an animal." Another soldier shouted, "Take her, Captain. She is yours now. Do not waste words on her." But the captain did not look away. His eyes were still on her, steady and strange. He repeated the question, softer this time. "What is your name?" The girl's hands shook. She wanted to speak, but fear gripped her throat. For years, she had been told she was nothing, that she was only for pleasure, for use, for reward. The thought of having a name felt dangerous. She lowered her head, too afraid to answer. The captain straightened. He looked at the soldiers around him, who were waiting for his reaction. He could see their smiles, their mocking eyes, their expectation that he would claim her like every man before. But instead, he said quietly, "If she has no name, then I will give her one." The words spread through the room like fire. The soldiers muttered, confused and angry. Why would a man waste time naming an animal? Why would he treat her differently? The girl dared to lift her head just a little. Her eyes met his for the first time. And in those eyes she saw something she had never seen before. Not hunger, not cruelty, not ownership. She saw recognition. She was trembling, but inside her chest, something long dead began to stir. The general's laughter broke the silence. "A name. Do as you wish, Captain. But remember, she is not a woman. She is not a soldier. She is not human. She is only a prize. Do not forget that." But the captain did not laugh. He looked at her again and whispered so only she could hear. "You are not an animal to me." The words struck her like thunder. She did not understand them, but they echoed in her heart. For the first time in her life, someone had spoken to her as if she was more than a thing, and at that moment, the soldiers around them could not see it. The general could not see it. But something had changed. Something small, quiet, and dangerous. Because one human, in a room full of noise and cruelty, had chosen to see her, and he had promised her a name. The hall had gone back to noise. But it was not the same kind of noise. It was not only laughter and victory now. It was whispers. Quiet whispers, sharp like knives. Did you hear what he asked? A name. What nonsense. He is a fool. A weak fool, the soldiers muttered to each other, shaking their heads, spitting on the ground, rolling their eyes. For them, the prize was simple. A body to use, a toy to break, nothing more. But this captain had broken the ritual. He had turned a reward into a question. And that made the others uneasy. The girl was still on her knees, her wrists bound by cold chains. She could not understand what had just happened. All her life she had been property. She had been taught to obey, to stay silent, to not dream. But this man, this strange captain, had done something impossible. He had looked at her like she mattered. The general clapped his hands once, breaking the tension. Enough, enough. The reward is given. The matter is finished. He turned his gaze to the captain. Take her away. She is yours now. Do with her as you please. The captain gave no answer. He simply nodded, then bent down and helped her to her feet. The soldiers laughed at the gesture. Look at him. He lifts her up like a bride. Another sneered, perhaps he wants to marry the animal. Their voices stabbed the air, but the captain did not reply. He held her arm gently, guiding her out of the hall. His touch was not harsh. It was steady, like a man leading someone to safety instead of prison. Outside, the night air was cold. The banner still waved, stained with the blood of war. Fires burned in iron bowls, lighting the camp with a dull red glow. She shivered, and not from the cold alone. The soldiers' voices echoed behind her, cruel and mocking. But his silence was stranger than all of it. They reached a tent at the far side of the camp. The captain opened the flap and led her inside. The tent was not like the others. It was not filled with stolen gold or bottles of drink. It was simple. A small table, a bed, a chest. It was quiet. He closed the flap behind them. The noise of the camp faded, leaving only the sound of her breathing. She stood still, waiting for the command, waiting for the hand that would strike or claim her. That was how it always went. That was what rewards were for. But the captain did not touch her. Instead, he walked to the table and poured water into a cup. Then he turned and held it out to her. Drink, he said. Her eyes widened. She hesitated. Was this another trick? Another test. Slowly, she reached out with shaking hands and took the cup. The water was cool on her tongue. It was the first time she had been given anything before being used. The captain watched her, his face calm, unreadable. Then he spoke. You will not sleep on the floor. You will take the bed. She froze again. The bed. The word felt dangerous in her mouth. Yes, he said simply. The bed is yours tonight. Her hands shook. She did not understand. She had seen other women dragged into tents, screaming, crying, broken. But none of them had ever been told to take the bed alone. None of them had ever been given water first. The silence stretched long. Finally, she whispered, Why? Why are you doing this? The captain did not answer right away. He sat down at the table, his eyes on the flame of the small lamp. At last he said, Because you are not an animal. Because someone must remember that. Her chest ached. The words were simple, but they cracked something deep inside her. She wanted to believe them, but years of chains told her not to. She was nothing. She was property, but now? Now there was a seed of doubt. The captain looked at her again. "I will not ask you again tonight. But tomorrow I will ask, and you will tell me your name, even if you have to choose it yourself." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She held the cup of water close to her chest as if it was a treasure. A strange warmth spread in her heart, fighting the cold of fear. For the first time in her life, she felt the faintest shadow of something she had never known. Not safety, not freedom, but something small and fragile like the first spark of a fire. Hope, and outside the tent, unseen in the darkness, two soldiers were watching. They whispered to each other, their eyes narrow with suspicion. "This captain is different," one muttered. "Too different," the other replied. "And different men. They do not last long." The next morning, the camp was restless. Soldiers polished their weapons, laughed too loudly, and told stories of last night's victory. But under their laughter was a new whisper. Carried from tent to tent, the captain treats her strangely. He gave her water. He let her sleep in his bed. Alone, he is soft. Weak suspicion grew like fire under dry wood. In an army where cruelty was strength, kindness was danger. Inside the captain's tent, the girl sat on the edge of the bed, her wrists still bruised from chains. She had not run away. Where could she run? The whole camp was a cage. But for the first time, her night had passed without fear. No shouting, no pain. Just silence, broken only by the sound of the captain's steady breathing as he kept watch. Now he stood near the table, his armor half removed, sharpening a knife. The sound of metal against stone cut the silence. At last he set the knife down and looked at her. "It is morning," he said quietly, "and I will ask again." Her heart quickened. She remembered his words from last night. She clutched the blanket around her shoulders, unsure if she should answer. "What is your name?" The question was simple, but it shook her. No one had ever asked. No one had cared. A name meant identity. A name meant she was more than property. Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. She had no name to give. The captain did not grow angry. He simply nodded, as if he expected her silence. Then he said, "If you cannot give me one, then I will give you mine for now." She looked up, confused. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "I will call you Ilara." The word was soft, but it filled the room like a song. She whispered it under her breath, almost afraid it would vanish. "Ilara." "Yes," he said. "Ilara. That will be your name until you choose your own." Her eyes burned. She did not cry. She had forgotten how to cry long ago. But inside her chest, something shifted. The chains on her wrists were still there, but inside her heart, a different chain had cracked. The captain poured water again and placed the cup on the table. "Drink, Ilara," she obeyed, her hands trembling. For the first time, the act of drinking water felt sacred. Each drop tasted of freedom, but outside the tent, shadows gathered. Two soldiers stood at the flap, pretending to pass by, but listening carefully. They heard the captain speak her new name. They heard her whisper it back, and their eyes narrowed. "This is wrong," one muttered. "He treats her like a woman," the other hissed. "If command learns of this, he will be punished." The whispers of the camp grew louder that day. Men laughed more harshly. Eyes followed the captain wherever he walked. And every glance at Ilara was sharper, filled with both disgust and hunger. By evening, the general summoned him. The captain entered the large war tent, where maps of conquest covered the tables and the air smelled of wine and victory. The general leaned back in his chair, smiling with too many teeth. "Captain, I hear you have grown." Attached to your prize, the room filled with low laughter. Officers around the table smirked, waiting for his denial. But the captain did not answer quickly. He stood straight, his face calm, his hands at his side. "She is under my protection," he said at last. The laughter stopped. The general's smile faded into a thin line. "Protection. She is an animal, Captain. A toy for pleasure, nothing more." The captain's voice remained steady. "No, General, she is not." The officers muttered angrily, fists slamming on the table. One shouted, "This is dangerous talk." Another sneered, "You shame us before our own men." But the captain did not waver. "You gave her to me as a reward. She is mine now, and I will decide what she is." The general's eyes narrowed. Silence filled the tent, heavy and sharp. Finally, the general laughed coldly. "Very well. Keep your pet. But remember, captains, animals bite, and those who keep them grow weak." The meeting ended. But as the captain left, he knew the words were a warning. That night, in the quiet of his tent, Ilara sat on the bed, whispering the name he had given her over and over. Ilara, Ilara. Each time, it felt stronger, more real. For the first time, she looked at her reflection in a small piece of polished metal on the table. She touched her face, whispered again. "Ilara." The captain watched her silently, his eyes unreadable. And outside, beyond the thin walls of the tent, the whispers of soldiers grew darker, sharper, more dangerous because in a world that denied her humanity, one name had lit a fire, and fires, once started, could not be hidden forever. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Soldiers still laughed and drank, but their eyes always drifted toward the captain's tent. Their whispers spread faster than smoke. He gave her a name. He lets her walk free inside his tent. He speaks to her like she is a pupa. In the camp of conquerors, cruelty was honor. Kindness was weakness. And weakness was dangerous. Inside the tent, a different world was being built. Small, quiet, fragile, but real. The girl, now Ilara, still moved carefully, like a bird afraid of sudden hands. But each day, the captain gave her something new. A piece of bread, a clean cloth, a place to sit at the table instead of the floor. He never raised his voice. He never struck her. He simply saw her. At first, Ilara did not trust it. Every gift felt like a trap. Every quiet moment felt like the pause before pain. But slowly, she began to test the edges of this strange safety. One evening, as the captain removed his armor, Ilara reached out with trembling fingers. She touched the steel plate resting on the table. The sound of her nail against the metal was soft, but it made her flinch, as if she had broken some law. The captain looked at her. His eyes were calm, steady. "Do you want to know how it works?" She froze, uncertain. Then she nodded. He lifted the armor and placed it carefully in her hands. It was heavy, heavier than she expected. Her arms shook under the weight, but she did not let it fall. For the first time, she was holding something that belonged to power. And he was letting her. "This," he said, pointing to the dent on the side, "is from the last battle. It saved my life." Ilara touched the dent, her fingers tracing the scar of war. She had never been allowed to touch such things. She looked up at him, her lips forming words she had not spoken in years. "Why?" "Show me this." His answer was simple. "Because you are not an animal. You deserve to know the world you live in." The words struck deep. She bowed her head, hiding her face, but her lips whispered the name he had given her. "Ilara." The captain nodded. "Yes, Ilara." That night, as she lay on the bed, she found herself staring at the lamp's flame, unable to sleep. In her chest, a strange warmth grew. It was not safety, not yet. But it was trust. A fragile bond, invisible but unbreakable, once formed. But bonds draw eyes. Outside the tent, shadows moved again. A soldier leaned close to another, whispering, He is breaking rules. He makes her human." The others spat on the ground. "We should tell the general, or we deal with it ourselves." "Not yet," the first hissed. "Watch them. See how far this goes." The danger was growing, though Alara did not know it. The next day, the captain gave her something she never expected: words. He placed a small scrap of parchment and a piece of charcoal in front of her. "Write," he said. Her eyes widened. She shook her head. I cannot." "Then I will teach you." Hours passed in silence, broken only by his steady voice and her trembling attempts. At first, her marks were messy, clumsy scratches. But when she managed to form the first letter of her name, her hands shook and her breath caught in her throat. She whispered it, almost in disbelief. "E." For Ilara, the captain's lips curved, just slightly. It was not a soldier's laugh, not a mocking smile. It was quiet pride. Ilara stared at the letter long into the night. It was only one mark, one symbol. But to her, it was proof. Proof that she was real. The bond between them grew, invisible but powerful. She began to speak more, her voice soft, fragile, but alive. She asked questions. She laughed once, only once, and very quietly, but it startled even her. And yet, outside, the whispers turned sharper. By the fifth night, the general sent for the captain again. His words were cold. "You are soft. She is bending you. Men are watching. They say you have forgotten what you are." The captain stood firm. "I have forgotten nothing. But I will not treat her as less than she is." The general leaned close, his voice like poison. "Then you are walking a dangerous path. One wrong step and both of you will fall." The warning was clear. Back in the tent, Ilara saw the weight in the captain's eyes. She wanted to speak, to ask, to thank him. But all she could do was whisper the one thing he had given her: "My name." Ilara, and for the first time, she said it not in fear, but with pride. The captain looked at her, and for a heartbeat, the war outside did not exist. Only the bond did. But bonds, once seen, invite enemies. And already, unseen in the darkness, hands were preparing to break it. The war never rested. At dawn, horns called across the valley. The army was to march again. Another raid, another fire, another village to burn. Soldiers laughed as they sharpened blades, their voices rising with hunger for blood. The captain prepared silently. He strapped on his armor, piece by piece. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a weight. Ilara watched him, sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. "You will stay here," he told her. Her heart sank. "Stay alone." "Yes," he said. His voice was steady, but softer than usual. "It will be safer." But Ilara shook her head. For days, she had lived in his tent, learning words, learning her name. And in those days, the fear that had ruled her whole life had begun to fade. For the first time, she felt more than survival. She felt loyalty, she whispered. "I go with you." The captain's eyes narrowed. For a moment, silence stood between them. Then he sighed, fastening the last piece of armor. "Stay close to me. Do not leave my side." The march began. The ground shook beneath hundreds of boots. The banners snapped in the wind, black against a sky of gray. Ilara walked among them, wrapped in a plain cloak the captain had given her, her steps unsteady. Eyes followed her. Soldiers sneered, whispered, spat. Why bring her? She is slowing him down. Watch. She will betray him. Their words cut the air. But the captain ignored them. The battle came at noon. Steel clashed, screams filled the air, and smoke rose in black columns. The enemy fought like cornered beasts, desperate and wild. The captain moved through the chaos with precision, his blade cutting swift and sure. Elara stayed close, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She had seen death before, but never like this. Then it happened. From the trees, an enemy soldier lunged, blade raised, aimed straight for the captain's back. Elara saw it before he did. Time seemed to slow. Her body moved before her mind could think. She grabbed a fallen spear from the ground and thrust it forward with all her strength. The point struck true. The enemy soldier fell, his eyes wide with shock, his blood soaking the dirt. For a moment, the battlefield disappeared. All Elara could hear was her own breath, fast and sharp. Her hands trembled on the spear. She had never killed before. The captain turned, his eyes locking on her. Surprise flickered across his face, but also something else. "Respect Elara," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Stay with me." She dropped the spear, her chest heaving, and nodded together. They pushed through the fight. The captain's blade flashed, her eyes scanned every shadow. Fear still lived in her, but now something stronger burned beside it. She had saved him. She was no longer only protected. She was a protector. When the battle ended, the humans stood victorious once more. Fires burned in the ruins, and the air stank of blood. The soldiers cheered, raising their weapons. But their cheers faded when they saw Elara. She killed one of them, a soldier muttered. With her own hands, another spat. "She is dangerous." The whispers spread like poison. Where they once mocked her as weak, now they feared her. And fear, in soldiers' hearts, quickly turned to hate. That night, in the camp, the general summoned the captain. "You let her fight?" the general said coldly. "She saved my life," the captain replied. The general's eyes narrowed. "Do you not see? This is worse than weakness. She is an animal, and now she tastes blood. She will bite again." "She is no animal," the captain said, his voice steady. "She has proven it." The general slammed his fist on the table. "Proven nothing. You have broken order. And if she becomes more than property, then she becomes a threat. A threat to you. A threat to all of us." The captain held his ground. "Then let her be my threat. She belongs to me." The general leaned back, his smile sharp as a blade. "For now. But know this, Captain. The eyes of the camp are on you. One mistake, and both of you will pay." The meeting ended, back in the tent. Elara sat silently, her hands still stained with blood. She stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. When the captain entered, she looked up at him, her voice trembling. "I killed." He knelt in front of her, taking her shaking hands in his. His eyes were steady, grounding her. "You saved me," he said. "That is what matters." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, tears slid down her cheeks, the first tears she had allowed in years. That night, as she whispered her name over and over, Elara knew something had changed forever. She was no longer a prize. No longer only a victim. She had chosen to fight, and in the darkness, unseen by her. Soldiers outside the tent muttered with anger and fear. She is not just a pet. Now she is becoming a soldier. She must be taken away. The camp was restless. Victory should have brought celebration, but instead it brought silence. Soldiers no longer laughed when the captain passed. They no longer spat only insults. Now their eyes burned with something sharper, suspicion, fear, and hatred. They whispered in corners. "She killed one of the enemy. She fights like a soldier. She is dangerous." Elara felt their stares. When she walked through the camp beside the captain, men muttered curses. Some made the sign of warding, as if she were cursed. She pulled her cloak tighter, her eyes on the ground, but she could not escape their venom. That night, the captain left for the general's tent. The air was cold, heavy with storm clouds. Alara sat alone in the captain's tent, her fingers tracing the letter E on the scrap of parchment he had given her. She whispered her name again and again, as if the sound of it could protect her. But outside, footsteps gathered. The flap of the tent burst open. Rough hands grabbed her, yanking her from the bed. She cried out, struggling, but the chains of fear still lived in her muscles. 2 soldiers dragged her into the night while others stood guard, their faces hidden in shadow. "Let me go." Her voice broke the air, but no one listened. They pulled her toward the general's tent. The fire outside burned bright, casting her face in light for the whole camp to see. Soldiers gathered quickly, hungry for the spectacle. The general stepped out, his cloak heavy on his shoulders, his smile cruel. "So," he said loudly, so all could hear. "The animal thinks she is a soldier." The crowd laughed, their voices sharp and cruel. Alara's heart pounded in her chest. She searched for the captain, but he was not there. "She killed on the battlefield," the general continued. "She broke the order of things, and a beast who tastes blood will always bite again. Tonight, we end this mistake." Alara's knees weakened. She tried to pull free, but the soldier's grip was iron. Fear flooded her veins. She thought of the captain's words, of the name he had given her. She whispered it under her breath, a prayer to herself. "Alara, Alara." Then a voice cut through the crowd. Enough. The captain pushed his way forward. His face was set in stone, his eyes blazing. "She is under my protection. You gave her to me as a reward. No one takes her from me." The soldiers hesitated. The general's smile turned colder. "Your protection. Captain, your protection has made her dangerous. She is no longer a prize. She is a threat." "She is not a threat," the captain said firmly. "She saved my life. She has earned her place." The crowd muttered angrily. Some shouted, "She is a curse." Others roared, "She is an animal." The sound grew louder, a wave of hate crashing against the captain's calm voice. The general raised his hand. Silence fell. He stepped closer, his words sharp as a blade. "You have grown weak, Captain. You have broken discipline. You shame your brothers. So here is my judgment. You will give her up, or you will fall with her." The captain's jaw tightened. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword. "Then I fall with her." Gasps broke the air. Soldiers stared in shock. Some spat in rage, others grinned, eager for blood. The general's eyes glittered with cruel delight. "So be it." He waved his hand. The soldiers holding Alara dragged her forward, forcing her to her knees. One raised a blade above her neck. Time slowed. The fire roared. The crowd leaned forward, hungry to see her end, and then steel rang. The captain's sword flashed, cutting through the soldier's arm before the blade could fall. The man screamed, dropping his weapon. Chaos exploded. The captain pulled Alara to her feet, his voice fierce. "Run!" The camp erupted. Soldiers shouted, weapons drawn, torches blazing. Some charged, others hesitated, torn between loyalty to their general and fear of their captain's wrath. The general's roar cut through the night. "Seize them! Kill them both!" Alara stumbled beside the captain, her heart racing. For the first time, she was not being dragged in chains. She was running, free but hunted. Arrows flew past. Steel clashed behind them. The captain fought off every soldier who dared step in his path, his sword a storm of fury. Alara followed close, her breath burning, her mind screaming one truth. She would not go back to chains. They broke through the edge of the camp, the night swallowing them. Behind them, the general's rage shook the air. Hunt them. Do not let them escape. Alara fell to her knees once they reached the dark of the trees. Her chest heaved, her body shaking. She looked up at the captain, who stood above her, blood on his blade, fire in his eyes. "You saved me once," he said. His voice was quiet, but fierce. "Now I will save you. Until the end." And in that moment, Elara knew the truth. The betrayal was complete. There was no going back. The army would not stop. The general would not rest. The bond between them had become war. The forest swallowed them whole. The cries of soldiers echoed in the distance, but the night grew thick, and the trees became their shield. The captain's breath was heavy, his armor torn, his blade stained. Elara stumbled beside him, her legs trembling. But she refused to let go of his hand. For the first time in her life, she was not chained. For the first time, she was running toward something instead of being dragged away. The moon broke through the clouds, silver light spilling over the leaves. They stopped in a clearing, both gasping for air. Elara collapsed to her knees, clutching her chest. "They will follow," she whispered. The captain sheathed his sword and scanned the shadows. His eyes were sharp, but his voice was calm. "Then we keep moving. We do not stop." Elara shook her head. Her whole body was weak, but her spirit was burning. "Why? Why do you risk all this?" "For me?" The captain knelt in front of her. His face was close now, his eyes steady, his voice quiet enough for only her to hear. "Because you are not a prize. You are not an animal. You are Elara." Her lips trembled as she whispered the name. "Elara." "Yes," he said firmly. "Your name, your life. And no one will take it from you again." Tears blurred her vision. She had lived her whole life unseen, unheard, unnamed. And now, in the middle of a dark forest, hunted by an army, one man had given her everything she had been denied: identity, dignity, love. The sound of horns broke the silence. The army was close. Torches flickered through the trees like angry stars. The captain pulled her to her feet. "We cannot stay. There is a river ahead. If we cross, their horses cannot follow." They ran again, branches cutting their skin, roots catching their feet. Behind them, the hunt grew louder. Alara's breath burned, but she did not stop. The thought of going back to chains was worse than death. At last, the roar of water filled the air. The river was wide, black under the moonlight, its current fierce. The captain looked at her, his jaw tight. "Can you swim?" She shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. "Then hold on to me," he said. Without waiting, he pulled her into the water. The cold was like knives, the current like claws. Elara gasped as it dragged her under, but the captain's arm was iron around her. He kicked against the current, forcing them forward. Each stroke a battle. On the shore, soldiers shouted, torches blazing. Arrows hissed into the water, missing by inches. "Elara, hold on." The captain shouted. She clung to him, her heart hammering. She wanted to scream, but instead she whispered her name into the rushing water, again and again. "Elara, Elara." The river fought them, but the captain was relentless. With a final surge, they broke onto the far bank, gasping, soaked. Alive, the soldiers cursed on the other side, unable to cross. Their torches flickered like dying stars as the forest swallowed them again. Elara collapsed on the grass, trembling, her body weak, but her spirit alive. She looked up at the sky, the stars shining cold and clear. For the first time, the world felt wide, endless. Possible. The captain sat beside her, his chest rising and falling, his face turned to the heavens. For a long time, they said nothing. Only the river spoke, carrying the army's rage away. At last, Elara turned to him. Her voice was soft, fragile, but certain. "Why do you care? Truly?" He met her eyes, and in them she saw no shadow, no chain, no claim. Only truth. because no one gave me a name once. And I swore if I ever found another like me, I would give them one, and I would never let it be taken away." Her breath caught. She touched his hand, hesitant at first, then firmly. "You gave me life." The captain shook his head. "No, you found your life yourself. I only reminded you." The silence stretched, but it was no longer heavy. It was full. The stars above seemed brighter, the forest less dark. Elara whispered her name one final time, not in fear, not in doubt, but in pride. Elara, the captain's lips curved, not the hard smile of a soldier, but the quiet, gentle smile of a man who had chosen love over war. That night, by the riverbank, hunted and alone, they were free. She was no longer a pleasure animal, no longer a prize, no longer nameless. She was Elara, and for the first time in her life, she was loved.